This photo was taken by an ordinary person, and at first glance there's nothing special about it, but if you take a closer look you can see a dead squirrel on the ground. Here it is. An unknown wildlife enthusiast has been taking photos of the park for years, and when he revisited them years later he noticed a weird thing. A tree had sprouted where the dead squirrel once lay. And not just any tree, but a tree completely unlike the other trees in this park. Today you'll find out how plants can help find missing people, where predator trees come from, why cows don't like heavy metal, how a tiny fly became the most advanced geneticist on the planet, and why human skulls covered by fungus were so valuable in the Middle Ages. So after hearing about that dead squirrel, I started wondering whether a tree can really sprout from a dead body. Well, yes, it can. Fruit-bearing plants often rely on fruit-eating animals, from birds and bats to bears and monkeys. When undigested seeds leave the bodies the way nature intended, plants have a chance to grow roots in a new place. Though, turns out that seeds can get to new places with the help of people, even if those people are already dead. Legend has it that an ingested seed can sprout through a dead person's stomach. And not only through it, it can sprout through any part of the dead person's digestive tract, such as the small or large intestine. Even a seed in a dead person's pocket or a seed in a general burial area can gather nutrients from a decomposing body. One of the most famous examples you can find on the web is the story of Ahmet Hurgani. He was the victim of a 1974 conflict in Cyprus between Greeks and Turkish Cypriots. The man and his companions were taken to a cave where all three were killed by a dynamite blast. The explosion blew a hole in the cave through which light entered and gave life to the fig seed that was in the man's stomach. Nearly 4 decades later, an explorer discovered a fig tree growing in the same cave. It was a curious place for a tree, so the researcher continued investigating and found the decomposed remains of 3 men, and one of them happened to be Ahmet Hurgani. The Committee on Missing Persons learned of this find and began their own investigation. By interviewing witnesses, they were able to piece together what happened on that fateful day. While the biological aspects of the story are accurate, it's possible that only parts of the story are true. That is, the fig tree did grow in the cave, but no human remains were found in its roots. Though actually, plants can be useful in finding missing persons' remains. When people die, their bodies, of course, begin to decompose, and this makes searching for them quite difficult, especially in a warm environment where this process can happen quickly. And if the body's also located in the woods or other places with thick canopy, it becomes almost impossible to find it. Well, unless you know exactly where to look. And that's where plants come in. They're very sensitive to changes in their environment because they can't simply leave the place they grow if they don't like the conditions. They have to adapt. For example, nitrogen from the human body will make the leaves of plants near the corpse turn green because of increased chlorophyll production. If you ever happen to walk past a place where an undisturbed corpse has been lying for a long time, you won't mistake it for anything else. The grass can be dry and dead everywhere, but in this particular spot, here it'll be lush and green. In addition, the green patch will be spangled with flowers, red, blue, and yellow. Plants can also respond to illegal substances or metals that leach from dead bodies into the soil. Plus, dead bodies alter the microbes near the roots, which in turn affect the nutrients the plants absorb through those very roots. So far, scientists don't fully understand exactly how plants respond to the presence of corpses. This topic remains poorly studied as researchers only began to look into it in the 1920s, and on a scientific timescale, it's like yesterday. But in the future, such information could be used to find the remains of missing people. To give you an idea of how this is supposed to work, here's a simple example. If the missing person smoked a lot, his chemical profile could trigger some unique plant reaction, and that, in turn, would help locate the corpse. But here's the thing. Humans aren't the only creatures dying in the forest, so we'd have to find a special way to distinguish between the metabolic processes of a human and, for example, a dead deer. It's still unclear how to do this. Plants actually thrive on dead animals and grow much better near their carcasses. Scientists found this out by doing an experiment involving red deer. Well, they weren't active subjects since they were already dead, but that's details. The scientists first recorded the presence of insect species on surfaces both with and without carcasses, and then plant growth in the immediate vicinity of a carcass. Turned out that the carcasses not only benefit from many carrion-eating insects, but also had a positive long-term effect on plant growth. For example, thistles grew 5 times larger near carcasses than elsewhere. More plants means more herbivorous insects as well as those creatures that prey on them. All in all, it turns out that each carcass has an impact on the entire local food chain and continues to do so even 5 months after death. While some plants are acting nice and adapt to the presence of animals' carcasses, others kill the animals that help them. The tree of Pisonia genus is known for its amazing ability to trap and kill unsuspecting birds that land on its branches. This tree grows in tropical waters off the coasts of India and the Pacific Ocean and produces long seeds covered in thick mucus and tiny hooks that can stick to almost anything that touches them. When birds land on the Pisonia tree, so many of these seeds stick to them that their wings become too heavy. The bird can't fly anymore and just drops down. If it's not eaten by a passing scavenger or predator, the unfortunate bird dies and decomposes at the roots of the tree. And some of the birds remain stuck high in the branches, like the creepiest Christmas tree ornaments imaginable. And it's not clear why the Pisonia tree does this. From an evolutionary point of view, this strategy is not exactly useful. Dead birds won't spread seeds, and the dropping from living birds are much more nutritious than their own decomposing bodies. Studies prove that there's no difference between the seedlings that were planted next to the corpses and those that developed under normal conditions. So it seems that this is just a senseless tree cruelty. Good thing the Pisonia trees didn't march on Isengard. Actually, dead animals make excellent fertilizer, compost. To make it, the carcass is first placed in material rich in carbon, sawdust, wood shavings, nut holes, and the like. The larger the animal, the more material needs to be added above and below to speed up the decomposition process. It also wouldn't hurt to cover the top of the carcass with finished compost. Once buried in a carbon-rich environment, an animal carcass typically takes up to 6 months to fully decompose. Naturally, the smaller the animal, the faster it will turn into fertilizer. Nature follows a logical pattern here. But all these stories about compost made from dead animals are, frankly, not very inspiring. Turning into a tree after death is a different thing altogether. Seriously. Any traditional burial methods seem meaningless compared to that. Capsula Mundi, which translates to world's capsule from Latin, was developed by Italian designers as an environmentally friendly alternative to traditional coffins, which are made of wood, synthetic cushioning, and metals. They take a very long time to break down and create waste in the process. In general, it's an environmental disaster. Capsula Mundi offers a different approach. This is an egg-shaped organic casket made of biodegradable plastic for ashes or remains. When buried in the ground or sand, the capsule breaks down over time and provides nutrients to the sapling planted directly above it. This allows the body or ashes of the deceased to become part of something living again, literally becoming a tree. Imagine a cemetery full of trees, not tombstones. It's as if there's life after death, but completely real. Honestly, I wouldn't mind being buried like that. Speaking of the relationship between plants and dead bodies, one can't help but wonder if all trees are vegetarians. Many people, especially those on a strict vegetarian or vegan diet, ponder this question. After all, trees only need soil, sunlight, and water to survive, right? Nope. Sure, trees don't eat animals directly. They don't catch, bite, or chew them, but they consume them anyway with the help of fungi. Trees are known to be able to produce simple sugars through photosynthesis, but trees also need minerals like potassium, calcium, sodium, plus certain metals. And this is where fungi come in. They can be found literally everywhere in the forest soil, forming a massive network of millions of microscopic filaments that stretch in different directions. The fungi network is constantly soaking up water from the soil and looking for new food. But that's not all. Fungi produce enzymes that can break down the fats and proteins of dead organisms. However, fungi are not capable of photosynthesis, so they lack sugar. This is what drives the fungi's relationship with trees. The filaments of the fungi connect to the roots of the tree, essentially covering them like a well-fitted glove, and release structures that provide a two-way exchange of nutrients. When this exchange is established, the tree can give up some of its sugars to meet the fungi's needs, receiving water-dissolved minerals in return from the fungi. This way, trees consume animal components, which means we can't consider trees to be completely vegetarian. But what struck me most was the fungus that literally loves corpses. Actually, Hebeloma is a genus of fungi that don't need some special conditions to thrive. These fungi grow wherever they want, both on the soil and on the remains of trees. and some species feel fine even in old fire pits. So apart from not being particularly picky, the fungus wouldn't really stand out if some of its species didn't love decaying corpses.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm talking about Hebeloma venusophyllum. In 1968 in Kyoto, Japan, they found a bunch of this fungi species, and further studies showed that the source of nitrogen necessary for their growth was the remains of dead dogs. A little later, in 1975, another bunch was found near the Kyoto University campus in soil with cat bones. In 1998, Steve, do we really have to mention the year every time? Okay. In 1998, Hebeloma was found very close to the skull and bones of a jungle crow in the town of Urawa. At the body farm in Tennessee, where researchers study the decomposition of human bodies under different conditions, they made an intriguing discovery. They found that a particular species of Hebeloma was growing in burial sites so consistently that it earned the nickname corpse finder. So in theory, if you see a large number of some Hebeloma fungi somewhere, you should proceed with caution. You may be walking near a crime scene. Another Hebeloma species, Hebeloma aminophyllum, is generally known as the ghoul fungus. This species of Hebeloma grows in Western Australia and likes to stay close to dead animals like sheep, reptiles, and birds. Well, now that we're talking about fungi and corpses, we just have to mention Usnea lichens. They too aren't picky at all and ready to grow on anything, from bark and twigs to tombstones and skulls. In the late Middle Ages, the lichen from skulls was considered very valuable because doctors prescribed it for a bunch of different diseases. And the nature of the skull's owner's death was thought to dictate the potency of the medicine. It's difficult to determine when exactly these lichens suddenly became so popular among healers. The first written mention of them dates back to 1493. But the Middle Ages weren't exactly known for meticulous record keeping, but we do know what logic prevailed at the time. The people of that time were firmly convinced that a person had a soul. If a person died a natural death, his soul would fade away. Well, or it would go to a better world. There could be options. But if the death was violent, the soul remained in place. And since bones don't rot, doctors of the time made the logical conclusion that they contained the soul, which could be extracted to prolong the life of the living. The skull was especially valuable because, according to some healers, it also absorbed the brain after a person's death. Now imagine lichen growing on all sides of the precious skulls. Yes, they became a symbol of the wealth of whoever owned them. Consumers would take these skulls and scrape them for the lichens, which were ground up and used, among other things, to speed up the healing of wounds, cure whooping cough, and even epilepsy. Did it help? I'm not so sure. It's hard to imagine anyone could stop a medieval man from indulging in wishful thinking when he was fully committed to it. But if you think using lichen as a remedy for whooping cough is ridiculous, you have to know people came up with even weirder ideas. Like using the weapon salve Unguentum armarium for the so-called magnetic cure of wounds. Instead of curing the wound, people were curing the weapon that inflicted it. I don't really think the weapon suffered that much from what happened, but medieval people were convinced. Weapons were anointed and bandaged until the wound of the person was completely healed. The weapon itself could be very far away from the wounded person, or even if it's actually a different type of weapon, as long as it matched the shape, it was good enough. The important thing was to put it into the wound, stain it with blood, and then do strange manipulations with the ointment.
I need a knife. There is a medical emergency.
Today, this treatment might seem absurd to us, but at that time, it was very popular, even among educated people, and was widely used by doctors. What about plants, fungi, and living people? Can anything sprout inside a person and kill them? Turns out it's possible. A 28-year-old guy from Russia went to the hospital complaining of severe chest pains and coughing up blood. The doctors, as one would expect in such a situation, took an x-ray and saw something that looked like a tumor. Having a good reason to suspect it was cancer, they scheduled surgery. But when the surgeons opened his chest to remove the tumor, they were extremely surprised. Instead of a tumor in the lung, they found a branch about 2 inches long. "I thought I was hallucinating," one of the surgeons said. "I asked my assistant to have a look. Come and see this. We've got a fir tree here." The bloody cough was caused by tiny pine needles piercing the blood capillaries. Sounds painful, but that's still better than cancer. The doctors have no idea how exactly the tree ended up in his lung. One theory says that the guy inhaled a seed and it somehow sprouted inside him. According to another theory, he inhaled the entire branch from the start, but had no memory of it. Don't ask me how or why. I have no idea. A 75-year-old man from Cape Cod Peninsula in Massachusetts had a similar problem, only his tumor turned out to be a sprouted pea. Apparently, at some point, the unfortunate man inhaled a pea seed. Well, that's about it. Fortunately, doctors were able to remove the sprout from his lung, and the man quickly returned to normal life. How can anything grow inside a person where the conditions are so unlike those required for plants to thrive? Well, we need to explain this in detail. To grow, a plant needs oxygen, heat, water, and sunlight. There's no problem with oxygen after all, that's what the lungs are full of. The human body also has enough heat and moisture. But what about sunlight? The thing is, the stuff found inside those people was sprouts, not fully grown plants. When a pea seed germinates, it usually happens underground. The seed stores some energy, allowing the plant to grow until it reaches the surface. Then the process of photosynthesis, necessary for the growth to continue, kicks in. But without sunlight, fat chance. In short, if you suddenly start having a new phobia, you can relax. A whole plant can't grow inside your lung. Though they do grow on animals, polar bears in zoos have been known to turn green because they rub against the concrete floor in their enclosures and damage their fur. These abrasions open a way to algae that can live and multiply inside. This doesn't happen in the wild, of course, because the temperatures in the Arctic are too low for the algae to survive. But in different conditions, you can observe a unique phenomenon: a green polar bear. You can also see plants on turtles. Grass and algae often get on their shells, although it's believed that it doesn't bother the animal in any way. In some cases, if there's too much vegetation, it can create unnecessary drag and reduce turtle speed. Usually, however, the grass is a benefit, acting as an additional camouflage for the turtle. Plants also love sloths, because these guys are never in a hurry. The algae that grows on most of these 6 species of sloths is called Trichophilus welkeri, and this species is not found on any other animal. The algae pass from mother to cubs when they're only a few weeks old. This is how the cubs get their natural camouflage and the algae get their mobile patch. However, some animals went even further and literally became one with plants. The eastern emerald elysia is a species of small gastropod mollusk and the first animal known to scientists to produce the plant pigment chlorophyll. Looks like the crafty slugs stole the genes that gave this skill from the algae they eat. Thanks to the stolen genes, the slugs can do photosynthesis. That is, convert sunlight into energy. You get it right? These animals don't even need to eat anything. They can just feed on the sun rays. In addition to stealing the genes required to produce chlorophyll, these slugs also steal tiny parts of cells called chloroplasts, which they use for photosynthesis. But they don't need to keep stealing it over and over again. The eastern emerald elysia assimilates the genetic material so well it passes it down to the next generation. Whiteflies have a slightly different situation. They have plant DNA hidden in their genome. And this is one of the first known cases of gene transfer from a plant to an insect. It supposedly happened at least 35 million years ago and seems to have turned whiteflies into formidable pests. 10 or 20 years ago, no one thought such gene transfer was even possible. There are simply too many barriers a gene has to overcome to transition from plant to insect, but the research clearly shows that it did happen. Although it's still unclear how the whitefly acquired the plant DNA, viruses might have played a role in facilitating the gene transfer. It's certainly only a theory so far. Scientists suspect that a virus transferred from the whitefly to the plants, or vice versa, took on some of the plant's DNA. Then, when the virus infected the whitefly, the plant DNA spread and was eventually incorporated into the insect's genome. As we discuss plants, fungi, and corpses, many of our viewers have probably remembered the plot of The Last of Us. What if some kind of virus appears that mixes human DNA with plant or fungal DNA and starts a zombie apocalypse? Let's find out if that's a plausible scenario. Let me say right away that a fungus similar to the one that plagued humanity in the TV series exists in real life. The only difference is that it prefers ants. Cordyceps enters the insect and takes over all its functions while keeping it alive. It then forces the ant to climb to the highest point of the plant and clamp down on it so that the fungus then explodes out of the ant's head and flies as far away as possible. This is not so different from the way Cordyceps acts in the show, capturing human bodies and then using them to spread further. The transmission method's a little different though. Infected ants don't try to bite uninfected ones. Moreover, fungal infections in humans are also a very real phenomenon in today's world. There are many fungi affecting the brains of people all over the planet, often with devastating consequences. Several species of fungi are fairly well-known pathogens which kill hundreds of thousands of people every year. It's just that people don't know much about it. Knowing all this, we can assume that there may well be a fungus on the planet that would act like cordyceps, but target humans. Professor Elaine Bignell suggests that factors such as climate change may well cause fungi to evolve and infect humans in ways we've not yet seen. We know of more than 150,000 species of fungi, but few of them can survive at human body temperatures, at least yet. But there is some encouraging information. Although the show depicts evil fungi enslaving humanity, the rate and extent of fungal growth portrayed is highly unrealistic and beyond the realm of possibility in real life. Yes, some fungi can be transmitted from one person to another, but the likelihood of a fungus that can lead to our extinction is just negligibly small. Well, experts are already preparing for such scenarios today, studying specific species and testing antifungal treatments. Steve tells me it's time to get back to the main subject of our video. So, what else can a plant take from the human body? Let's leave aside all those scary interactions because plants seemingly enjoy our breath and our voice. Studies have shown that certain elements of speech, or just sound in general, can help plants grow faster and healthier. There are several theories that explain this. One says that the carbon dioxide we exhale on plants as we talk to them promotes their growth. This sounds logical, but there's very little evidence to support it. Another theory claims that talking causes vibrations, and scientists have sort of found evidence that plants actually respond to a number of stimuli, including vibrations. And since vibration has been found to stimulate plants, we can assume that music is just as good for that purpose. You've probably heard that plants love music. Many studies have been done to test the sound and vibration theory. Even Mythbusters did an experiment to test it out. The results showed that plants had the best growth rate in greenhouses where music was played. But insects don't like music at all, especially if it's rock music. In the journal Ecology and Evolution, researchers described an experiment that featured ladybugs, one of the most prominent predators of agricultural pests. The scientists placed one ladybug larva and several aphids in a petri dish. Some ladybugs grew in silence, some listened to classical music, and others were exposed to tracks like AC/DC. During the experiment, the ladybugs exposed to loud rock music ate fewer aphids than the insects who ate either in silence or to the quieter sounds of classical music. Cows, by the way, also like quiet music, so much so that the playlist affects the amount of milk they produce. Back in 2001, a study showed that animals who listened to slow music produced 3% more milk than those who didn't hear any music or listened to faster tunes. Researchers found that slow songs with a frequency of fewer than 100 beats per minute appealed to cows the most. It seems that slow music relieves stress and helps animals relax. And when you're a relaxed, happy cow, why not give more milk? See you later.